Hi everyone, today let's talk about Tesla and Netflix earnings, then we'll go over economic data, as well as Max Payne for the Friday expiration, then we'll get into the charts, then we'll look at my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So Tesla brought in nearly $25 billion in revenue as margins declined after the price cuts. We talked about their price cuts and reduced margins, but still bringing in record revenue. You can see revenue here, almost $25 billion, beating expectations by about $500 million, 91 cents earnings per share, which did beat expectations as well. And net GAAP income was $2.7 billion, a 20% increase from the previous read. We already talked about their car deliveries and car manufacturing doing very well, as well as their first production of the Tesla Cybertruck. Hopefully next quarter we'll see some deliveries from that, and that'll increase their profits as well. But that's not included quite yet. It's worth noting that in second quarter last year, they brought in $2.27 billion in profits out of almost $17 billion in revenue. So their revenues are going up quite dramatically, but their profits are not increasing, which is part of the concern here with Tesla. They are working into the frontier of AI development and training computers. So this is another piece of Tesla that's going to be working with xAI, another company that Elon started here recently, but we're yet to see anything from that. It's also worth mentioning that they are ramping up production of their semi-trucks, as well as the Cybertruck like we mentioned before, but they do have their humanoid robot, the Tesla Bot or Optimus. Still early stages for that, but I think that could be a pretty good revenue driver for them at some point down the line. They also mentioned autonomous robot taxis, which is expected to be a huge driver of revenues and profits for them, but that is quite a long ways out, in my opinion. Overall, not a bad result, but still leaves some room for improvement. Moving over to Netflix, their subscriptions jumped by 8% and revenues climbed as expected as their password sharing crackdown is starting to take hold. Earnings per share, $3.29, much better than expectations. Revenue missed by a little bit, which is interesting considering the much higher subscriber base plus their ad-supported tier. Overall, not bad. Nice beat on the bottom line, slight miss on the top line. You can see that 5.9 million customers added during the second quarter, which is good. It means people are starting to get their own accounts. They mentioned that they have not seen the full benefits of their Shared Plus plan or their ad tier plan, and their forecast now predicts a revenue of $8.5 billion and a 7% year-over-year gain in third quarter. So overall, not bad, but we didn't see the full strength in terms of revenue quite yet. Moving over to the earnings calendar, you can see inflation in Europe still high, 5.5% on core CPI, not great, higher than expectations. Building permits, not great either. Housing starts missed by a lot, minus 8% versus the 7.2% expected. Previous read was also revised down, so not good there in home starts. Moving to tomorrow, we have initial jobless claims, as well as existing home sales. That'll be pretty interesting to see compared to home starts that we got today. And then Fed balance sheet at 16:30 tomorrow. Moving over to the earnings calendar, you can see that double beat here from Tesla. Netflix, beat on the bottom line, missed on the top. IBM, same. Very slight miss on the top line though. Activision Blizzard, beat on the top and bottom line. US Bancorp also beat on the top and bottom line. Goldman Sachs, one of the first biggest banks here to miss on the bottom line. Fairly interesting. Otherwise, everything is still good here. Looking at tomorrow, we have Taiwan Semiconductor, J&J, Abbott Labs, Philip Morris to wrap out the Thursday. Moving over to Max Payne, still sitting here at 434. Put call ratio continues to go higher, almost at 3 here on the SPY. Still sitting right at the top of the puts. You can see a few extra puts came in the market here today. So top of the puts actually sits at 458 now. So you could see a slight bump into the end of the week. That would be interesting. But a close in this zone wouldn't surprise me either. 460, fairly high call strike in comparison to some of these others. But mainly you can see huge amount of puts, way more than the calls, which in my opinion is still going to push the markets higher this week. Moving over to the SPY on the hour and the daily chart, not much to say here, rallied up a little bit. You can see that was a gap up and a doji. Not a great setup, especially after this rally that we've had. Doesn't mean we're going to reverse or anything, could absolutely just hold or continue higher. but it's interesting. Gap up, star, potentially looking for a pullback there maybe. Down a little bit after hours, but nothing huge on the earnings. Everything still looks pretty good here for the SPY. Watching this range, 453.07 up to 457.57, still trading in this zone. Moving over to the Qs here on the hour and the 12 hour, you can see it fell a little bit today off of that high from yesterday through some wicks and moved lower. Moving down to the 15-minute chart, you can see what that looked like, getting below the shorter-term EMAs just slightly. Had a rally up and a rejection from VWAP, but still holding that 144 EMA. So a little bit of consolidation, a little bit of breakdown in shorter-term trends. Otherwise, on the longer term, still very bullish. Slowing momentum, kind of interesting. RSI still very overbought, so certainly could see a little bit of a pullback. Definitely neutral here, not looking as bullish as the SPY. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, not much to say here either. Russell continues higher, still holding in the zone, 195 up to 198.69. As long as we're in this trend and in this zone, that's what I'm looking for. So looking for that upper price target here on this push. Dow also pushing a little bit higher. Got very close to trend resistance, also tested horizontal resistance, but ended up closing below it, so not great. Still a bullish day, but rejection at trend and horizontal resistance might end up seeing a little bit of a pullback down to the 9 EMA, down at 349.19. You're at the top of this range here, 350.92 down to 347.67. If you don't get above this early in the session and start to rally, you might end up seeing a bigger pullback down to that zone and the 21 EMA as this continues to trend higher. Moving over to copper versus gold and the equal weighted S&Ps, I just wanted to highlight that copper versus gold has kind of topped and created a lower high now and is pulling back very close to that midpoint. If this 55 EMA breaks and this starts to break down more into these lows, that could be a bearish signal. Otherwise, looking at the equal weighted S&Ps here, we talked about resistance at this level. It ended up gapping higher, testing this trend line. Now, if this trend line holds and we start to see a bigger pullback down to support, that could be interesting. Or if this turns into that blow off top and then a continuation lower, that could also be interesting. But otherwise, right now, you have a breakout and it looks a little bit stronger than it did yesterday. Looking at Apple and Tesla, you can see Apple broke out huge from that horizontal resistance, threw a wick to that trend line, and then broke down quite dramatically and ended up only $1 higher than it was yesterday. So not great. Definitely a clear rejection at all-time highs. On the daily chart, that trend line is sitting quite a bit higher, up around 202. So it could certainly push a little bit higher now. We also have this trend line here going back to January 23rd, marking some levels here, continues to hold in this zone, breaking out, still looking pretty good, but a fairly decent rejection from those highs. Looking at Tesla, we hit the upper trend line, threw a wick to the lower trend line, so we're right on track now. We've grinded up, hit resistance, pulled back on earnings. If this holds, get that bigger move, retest that 302 level, and then we get a more significant breakdown. Certainly looks like a nice setup so far as it continues to do basically what we thought it was going to. Moving over to Microsoft and Netflix, you can see Microsoft pulling back a little bit here today on the daily chart, still at that trend that we've been watching, still holding above it slightly, pulling back a little bit after hours, kind of interesting. Full screen that here on the 12 hour, you can see we've been rallying super strong, holding above trend. We pushed up pretty strong here on Tuesday, a little bit of follow through there. But here today, we had an inside candle for the first one. And now we're down at trend support. The rally is still intact, but we're below that 455.91 level that I had on my charts previously. Could absolutely break down on those earnings announcements and a little bit weaker guidance than we thought we were going to get. But otherwise, everything is still intact and it'll be worth watching going into tomorrow's session. Moving over to staples, we finally got some big pushes here. Got above the 200, pushed above that 74, nice strong close, looking at 75.40 to the upside. Everything looks good here now on staples. Interesting to see some rotation into defensives. We'll see if that continues. Moving over to discretionary, not much to say here. Continues to grind at that level. Did pull back to the 9 EMA a little bit, so below that trend after the rally that we had early in the markets. Overall, basically unchanged on discretionary, not giving a lot of upside potential until we get a more significant breakout. Moving over to the top performing sectors here, we have utilities and oil and gas. We've been talking about oil and gas for a while. Looked pretty good, up 0.5% on the day. Still want to see it get above 135.07 if it's going to. Hold above that line and start to push higher into these upper levels, maybe 146 or so. That would be interesting. Overall, still good here. Utilities also had a pretty good day after the wick down to 65.13. You can see the wicks continuing to get higher. Highs also getting a little bit higher. Looking for a push up to that 200 SMA, sitting at 67.59. Not much has changed. We got the bounce off of the trend line as you would have expected. Horizontal support also held here on the 200, rallying up towards resistance once again. Everything looks okay. Momentum did not step up here on the 50 like you would have wanted, but it did here on the 200. Looking for that push up to 76.04. Again, waiting for that 50 to get into the 92.25 zone and kind of top out this rally. Everything seems to be pushing in this same kind of rising wedge type setup, and breadth here is continuing to show that that is intact, and we're waiting for that final push. Moving over to yields, you can see the 2-year kind of chopping in this zone, still off of its highs, nothing crazy here. 10-year doing exactly what we would have expected, holding in this previous consolidation. Momentum still bearish, 2-year showing a little bit of movement to the upside, but overall nothing major coming here from yields. Moving over to the dollar, right on time, we got that continuation rally, still looking for a push up to that 101 area and the 55 EMA. We're above the 9 and 21 EMAs here on the 4-hour chart. Certainly could find some resistance here at the 9-day moving average as well, sitting at 100.69. So somewhere in that zone, 106.9 up to 100.8 here at the 55 EMA on the 4-hour, or major horizontal resistance up at 101.06. Moving over to JNK and TLT. JNK not doing much, rallied a little bit through a wick, basically unchanged. Still sitting on a lower high setup, not great. RSI pulling back a little bit, momentum fading. If this is going to hold, you really want it to hold this 92.50 level. And if that holds and we start to see a continuation, setting up a higher high, that would be great. But right now it's not showing us that yet. TLT rallying, broke out here today, looks good. We're above all the EMAs and SMAs, starting to push up to that 103.70 level. That 102.50 level is a strong one, and it did push through there quite cleanly. Might pull back a little bit, maybe retest that and get the continuation up to 103.70. That would be interesting. But now here on the 4-hour chart, we're pretty cleanly above with a nice impulse, big volume. Everything looks good here on TLT. Moving over to the volatility indices, bond volatility cratering here with TLT rallying aggressively. VIX not doing much of anything, continues to hold in this zone. Slight bullish momentum up to the 21 EMA, but nothing convincing quite yet. Moving over to my accounts, I made a little bit of money, which is pretty good considering that the NASDAQ was down here slightly, and it's actually down a little bit more after hours. We'll see how that plays out. I did end up rolling those calls a little bit further and a little bit higher than I probably should have, up to 184 for $4.56. So my break even is all the way down at 379.50. So not a ton of risk here, but it's out 2 days, which was a little bit further than I probably should have done. Either way, I did end up selling a 138 put here on the Qs to get into a second covered call, which is good. It's moving down a little bit now. I got 42 cents for that, so I'm actually looking to buy down at 381.50 or so. And then IWM, I rolled that call as well out to 195 for $2.88. I brought in a little bit of money on that. Even though the IWM ended up positive on the day, my max profit is going to sit up at 197.88. So I have a little bit of room for this to rally and still make money. And then I sold a 196 put here on my taxable account for 74 cents. Small loser here, but again, still thinking that the IWM looks clean to the upside. Bullish on the IWM, neutral still here on the Qs, and this is actually the first time I've ever seen this account at 6 figures, which is pretty cool, $100,046. Let me know down in the comment section if you think Tesla can start to improve on their margins and increase their earnings per share, or if that ship has already sailed. Also, let me know what you think of the password sharing policy with Netflix. It is clearly making them a little bit of money, but it is kind of contested in whether people like it or not. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.